Now come to the statement from the Prime Minister, EU trade oral statement. Keir Starmer, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. With permission, I'd like to update the House on the 3 recent trade deals we've struck in the national interest. But first, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to say something about the horrific situation in Gaza, where the level of suffering, innocent children being bombed again, is utterly intolerable. Mr. Speaker, over the weekend we coordinated a response with our allies, as set out in my statement with President Macron and Prime Minister Carney last night. And I want to put on record today that we're horrified by the escalation from Israel. We repeat our demand for a ceasefire as the only way to free the hostages. We repeat our opposition to settlements in the West Bank. And we repeat our demand to massively scale up humanitarian assistance into Gaza. The recent announcement that Israel will allow a basic quantity of food into Gaza, a basic quantity, is totally and utterly inadequate. So we must coordinate our response, because this war has gone on for far too long. We cannot allow the people of Gaza to starve, and the Foreign Secretary will come to the House shortly to set out our response in detail. Mr. Speaker, let me turn now to the 3 deals this government has struck. The principles we took into the negotiations are clear and simple. Does it drive down bills? Does it drive up jobs? Does it strengthen our borders? And in each case, the answer is resoundingly yes. These deals release us from the tired arguments of the past and, as an independent sovereign nation, allow us to seize the opportunities of the future. A clear message sent across the globe that Britain is back on the world stage. Mr. Speaker, a trade deal with the world's fastest growing economy, India, cutting tariffs for British industries, a huge boost for our whisky and gin distilleries. Their only concern now, Mr. Speaker, is whether they can produce enough to sell. And for our car manufacturers, tariffs slashed from over 100% to just 10%, with no concessions on visas. A trade deal with the world's richest economy, the United States, slashing tariffs, saving thousands upon thousands of jobs in car manufacturing in places like JLR, protecting our steel and aluminium exports and safeguarding interests for our hugely important pharmaceutical sector. But, Mr. Speaker, I can already see that when it comes to this hat-trick of deals, it's our new partnership with the EU that they most want to talk about. And, Mr. Speaker, and given their abject failure to strike a deal with India or the US, I can't say I blame them. So let me spell out the benefits of this deal, which gives our country an unprecedented level of access to the EU market. Mr. Speaker, the best access of any nation outside the EU or EFTA. I will start with our security, because when Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine over 3 years ago now, the gauntlet was thrown down, and it's our responsibility to step up. That is what this world demands, and it's what this partnership delivers, strengthening our national security through our new security and defence partnership. Mr. Speaker, that paves the way for British defence firms to access the EU's €150 billion defence fund. That will support British jobs, British wages, British livelihoods. The partnership also increases cooperation on emissions trading, saving UK businesses from having to pay up to £800 million of EU carbon taxes, once again backing British businesses. The deal will drive down bills with increased cooperation on energy, because the agreement negotiated by the party opposite left us with a more expensive way of working with our neighbours, a needless rupture despite our grids being connected by underseas cables. This partnership brings those systems together again, benefiting British bill payers and boosting clean British power in the North Sea. Mr. Speaker, it also strengthens our borders, because, again, the previous deal left a huge gap, weakened our ability to work together to tackle illegal migration, the ultimate cross-border challenge. This partnership closes that gap, including joint work on returns, preventing channel crossings and working upstream in key source and transit countries, cooperating along the whole migration route to strengthen our hand in the fight against the vile smuggling gangs. It boosts our cooperation on law enforcement, Mr. Speaker, combating terrorism and serious organised crime, with closer operational work with agencies like Europol and better sharing of intelligence and data, including, for the first time, facial imaging. Mr. Speaker, it helps British holidaymakers because they will be able to use e-gates when they travel to Europe, ending those huge queues to passport control. And it delivers for our young people because we're now on a path towards a controlled youth experience scheme with firm caps on numbers and visa controls. A relationship we have with so many countries around the world, some actually even set up by the party opposite. We should be proud to give our young people that opportunity. And, Mr. Speaker, not for the first time, this government has delivered for Britain's steel industry, protecting our steel exports from new EU tariffs, backing our steel sector to the hilt. But last but certainly not least, Mr. Speaker, we have a new SBS deal, as promised in our manifesto, that will cut the price of the weekly shop, more money in the pockets of working people, less red tape for our exporters, no more lorry drivers queuing for 16 hours at the border with rotting food in the back, no more needless checks, the inevitable consequence of their policies that made it so much harder to trade, even within our own market, between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And, Mr. Speaker, that means that British goods that have long been off the menu in Europe can regain their true place, including shellfish, hugely important in Cornwall, Devon and Scotland. Because, Mr. Speaker, not only does our deal on fish provide stability, with no increase in the amount that EU vessels can catch in British waters, it also provides a new SBS agreement which slashes costs and red tape for our exports into the European market. We sell 70% of our seafood into that market. It is a huge opportunity which our £360 million investment in British fisheries will now look to export. Mr. Speaker, the reaction to this deal from business has been absolutely clear. Mr. Speaker, I know you're a stickler for time. I don't have time to run through the list of supportive quotes from businesses. But this... Fine. All right. But this new partnership...
It was great.
Well, Mr. Speaker, this new partnership has been backed. This isn't the full list. The Federation of Small Businesses, the CBI, the British Retail Consortium, Asda, Morrison's, Salmon Scotland, the Food and Drink Foundation, the British Chamber of Commerce, Ryanair, Vodafone, producers of meat, foil and poultry, and on it goes. And I wonder whether that long list of businesses coming out to support this deal will temper the reaction of the Leader of the Opposition in her response. But then again, for weeks now, she's been dismissive of the benefits of any trade deal, in defiance, frankly, of her party's history. But it's not just them, it's also the member for Clapton, who's not here, the member for Kingston, who've both shown in their own ways that their parties simply do not get that if your whole approach to our allies is about striking a pose, then you don't get to strike a deal. And, Mr. Speaker, what that means in a world like ours, where deals are ever more the currency of security and justice, is that you don't get to make a difference and you don't get to deliver for Britain. That is what this partnership means. And for years we were told it couldn't be done. What they meant was they couldn't do it. We were told that a deal with the US or India was impossible. What they meant was impossible for them. We were told that a choice must be made between the US and the EU. What they meant was they couldn't do a deal with both. Mr. Speaker, this government can and this government will, because we stay in the room, we fight for the national interest and we put the British people first. That is what these deals represent, a signal that we're back on the world stage, a global champion of free trade playing our historic role on European security, but above all, making deals that put money in the pockets of working people. Because, Mr. Speaker, that is what independent sovereign nations do, and I commend this statement to the House.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Badenoch.
Mr. Speaker, when Labour negotiates, Britain loses. He talks about a hat trick of deals. They are own goals. In 2020, the Conservatives concluded the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the largest and most comprehensive free trade agreement in the world. We agreed to come back in 5 years to improve terms. This renegotiation should have been an opportunity to improve terms for our country. The terms are improved for the EU. And the Prime Minister can dress it up as much as he wants, but he has failed. It is bad for bills, it is bad for jobs, and it is bad for borders. This is not a deal made for Britain. This is a deal made for Labour's PR, to show them on the world stage. But it is a stitch-up for our country for their short-term headlines. Let's take the Prime Minister's abject failures one by one. First, on fishing. He has given away the prize most desired by EU member states and done so for almost nothing. Mr. Speaker, it is very easy to sign deals if you're prepared to give everything away for pennies. This deal locks out our fishermen until 2038. We are now in a worse position than the Faroe Islands, a set of islands with the population of Scarborough, but who get to have annual negotiations. And the Prime Minister quoted some organisations welcoming his deal. He doesn't listen to them normally, but he left one out deliberately. The National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations, who have described the deal as a surrender and a giveaway. This is a Prime Minister who would pay to give away his family silver. Why is the Prime Minister selling our fishermen down the river? Is it because they don't vote Labour? Second, on food and agriculture, the Prime Minister is going to pay the EU, Mr. Speaker, he's going to pay the EU to abide by laws that we have no say on. While British farmers struggle with the family farms tax his Chancellor has imposed on them, their regulations will now be made in Paris and enforced in Brussels. It is a total capitulation. We're not in the EU. We are not at the table. So can the Prime Minister tell us how is he going to ensure accountability for the hundreds of regulations he has signed this country up to? Third, on energy, the Prime Minister has shackled us to the EU's emissions trading scheme. This means the government can no longer cut energy costs without the EU's permission. It will also unravel parts of the India FTA he's just negotiated. This isn't a technicality, it is a betrayal. The House should be in no doubt. This means higher bills, more pain and less flexibility. Fourth, on his own manifesto promises, the Prime Minister said that we would not rejoin the single market. He promised no new payments, that he would protect British interests. That promise has lasted about as long as his commitment to protect pensioners' winter fuel allowance. He said whatever was needed to win power, Mr. Speaker, and now he'll say whatever is needed to keep it, even if it means selling out our sovereignty, our businesses and the public. The truth is that most of what was announced yesterday was not a deal. There was no binding agreement on anything. Most of the items outlined are simply agreements to enter into further discussions we are already having. The Prime Minister is boasting that we will now avoid airport queues because we'll get access to EU e-gates. It sounds great, except it isn't true. Some airports already allow it. This deal does not guarantee it anywhere. Each country still has to agree. And that, Mr. Speaker, sums up this deal perfectly. It is a lot of spin to disguise the terrible substance. Having previously ruled out a youth mobility scheme, the Prime Minister is now desperately trying to hide his latest U-turn by rebranding it as an experience. This is risen. We have no details on any cap, no details on any time limit, which begs the question, why is the government talking about increasing migration before it has got a grip on the small boats or the legal migration system? I know the Prime Minister doesn't like answering questions, but people out there want to know, can we have some honesty as to what has been discussed? How many young European workers does the Prime Minister think would be acceptable? And will they be able to bring dependents? Even the defence commitments in this deal are hopelessly one-sided. We're making payments, but they are offering dialogue and consultation. This is a pitiful return for the country that leads NATO in Europe with troops on the ground in Estonia defending our allies. Can the Prime Minister tell us why there's not a single word in his statement about the money we will now be sending to Brussels? And can he set out how much those payments will cost taxpayers? Mr. Speaker, in government, details matter, and so does honesty. They're laughing, but this is a bad deal for the country. Look at them. This is how they laughed at the budget. They have no idea what it is they signed up to. He said he would stay out of the single market. He's going into the single market for agri-food, electricity and energy. He said he'd stay out of the customs union, but he is accepting EU tariff rules. How does he plan to stop the EU changing them to our disadvantage? He has no idea, neither do any of them. Because the British people know, Mr. Speaker, when they are being misled. They know that headlines fail. He didn't listen to the CBI on the jobs tax. He didn't listen to the FSB on the family farms tax. This deal has already unravelled. The damage is becoming clear. The political consequences will be huge. And here he is, trumpeting his success. And when he stands up in a moment, he'll deflect, he'll dismiss, he'll distract. But we all know the truth. This was a fiction of a speech, a fraud of a deal, a failure of a Prime Minister.
Oh dear. That was just such an unserious response. She says detailed matter in government. They matter in opposition as well. The SBS agreement cuts red tape and bureaucracy for all food and agriculture going into the EU. That's a massive boost for our supermarkets, for our farmers and others. Why is it that all the supermarkets have come out behind this? Because they know how important the SBS agreement is. It's completely in our favour. Huge amount of detail there. The best agreement. On defence and security. Defence and security. Greater operational coordination. And she's against it at a time like that. It opens the gate to the EU Defence Procurement Fund of €150 billion. That was a condition of it. It saves, Mr. Speaker, she complains about emissions. I'll tell you how much. Businesses were going to pay £800 million a year in tariffs that they won't now pay. That's why they're coming out in support of it. That's how much. The detail matters. The detail matters. Energy, we're already connected. We're not using that energy connection. Electrical access to the market. On steel, getting rid of the tariffs that will support British steel. And she's against it yet again. E-gates. And she says they're already in existence. This clears the way for e-gates everywhere. That's the huge difference. And if any of them doubt that, they should travel through a border today and see the long queues. And law enforcement, better operational working with Europol, and she's against it. Information sharing on facial mapping, dealing with criminal records, and she's against it. She's absolutely unserious. She's also against the India deal, which of course does huge things for trades like whisky, where their only concern is whether they can produce enough. They've been absolutely clear about supporting the India deal, a deal they tried to do, and she now says she's against it. The US deal, which saved thousands upon thousands of jobs in car manufacturing, and JLR. I don't know whether she had the chance to do that trip to JLR, but she really ought to before she responds like that again. The US deal that reduces tariffs on steel so our steel can be sold into America, and she's against it and supports our whisky and gin. Mr. Speaker, she is against every single deal. She's the only ex-Trade Secretary who's against every single deal. This deal has been welcomed broadly because they're good deals. Now let me turn Oh, Mr. Speaker, you don't get a great long list of endorsements from all of the business associations, all of the companies. It's just they're so unserious that they're lost. They're lost into a descent in the abyss. They used to be a proud party of trading agreements. They have slid off into the abyss. That's where they are. And, Mr. Speaker, on fishing, none of the rights negotiated by the party opposite have been removed. None of the rights. No change to access to coastal communities, the same as before. No reduction in the British quota or increase in EU quota, same as before. Reciprocal arrangements, same as before. What is new, Mr. Speaker, is the SPS agreement for the first time and permanent. They were unable to do this. That reopens the EU market for shellfish and makes it much easier to sell British fish into our largest trading partner. And, Mr. Speaker, that's hugely significant because 72% of British fish is traded into EU markets. It's now easier to do that. And we're backing that with £360 million for our fishing and coastal grants. Mr. Speaker, she talks about the youth experience scheme. It is a capped scheme. It is time limited. It is capped. It's time limited. It is balanced. Mr. Speaker, on relation to standards, the truth is this: we are currently aligned in our standards. We just don't get the benefit of it. We want to continue to have high standards, and that's what the British public want, and that's what this deal delivers. We will have a role in shaping any future rules, and application of them is specifically subject to our constitutional arrangements. We will have a process in this Parliament to apply the rules. But let's be clear, we are already applying those rules at the moment. We're just not getting the advantage. This strips that away. It's good for our country, good for our economy. And it's a shame that she can't stand up and support it.
Chairman of the Trade and Industry Committee, Liam Byrne.
Mr. Speaker, this deal is good for business and this deal is good for Britain. I want to congratulate the Prime Minister on embracing a good half of the Select Committee's recommendations, agreed, if I might say, Mr. Speaker, cross-party. While some in this House are proposing trade barriers, he is building trade bridges, and that is in the national interest. Now, we have a deal, Mr. Speaker, but we do not have a date. And the OBR can't score the gains, and business can't plan for the benefits, and we can't suspend customs checks in Northern Ireland until we know when the new SPS checks will come into force. So what timetable has the Prime Minister given to his negotiators for when that SPS deal will come into effect? Because business needs certainty, and for that we need clarity.
Can I first pick up on his point about cross-party support at the Select Committee? Because there are members of the party opposite who I think are ashamed by the response to the Leader of the Opposition and know very well that these are good deals that should be supported. A number of backbench MPs are already coming out saying, actually, these deals are good and in the national interest. Mr. Speaker, you know who they are. Mr. Speaker, on the question of pace, let me assure the honourable gentleman, we've moved at pace to get the deals, and our instructions to our teams are to move at pace now to implement the deals, and that's what we'll do. We negotiated these in a number of short months. We'll keep moving at the same pace.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's remarks about the appalling situation in Gaza? And when he's working with our French and Canadian colleagues to put pressure on Netanyahu, will he consider, with the French, having a formal recognition of the state of Palestine? Speaker, coming to the EU reset deal, the Prime Minister will know that we don't think this deal goes far enough to fix our broken relationship with Europe. But there are many parts that we do welcome. We have long been arguing for an agri-food deal to help British farmers export to Europe. We have long argued for a youth mobility scheme to give our young people incredible new opportunities and British businesses, especially in hospitality, a boost. We have long argued for closer alliances on defence in the face of Putin's imperialism and Trump's unpredictability. So can I welcome the progress on these issues, even if it is only very limited progress on things like youth mobility? Because, Mr Speaker, we've all seen the terrible damage caused by the Conservatives' Brexit deal. And hearing the Conservative leader complain today is like listening to a backseat driver who previously crashed the car. Our country has moved on from the divisive Brexit wars of a decade ago, and some members of this House need to do the same. But does the Prime Minister accept that this deal must be only the first step? And we must be far more ambitious in strengthening our economic and security ties with our nearest neighbours. We believe that a bespoke customs union is a key part of that. Not turning back to the past, but forming a new partnership that serves our national interest. I know the Prime Minister once made that a red line, but he will accept that the world has changed since then. So will he open negotiations on a customs union to get a better deal for Britain? Mr Speaker, a trade deal to dwarf all other trade deals.
Well, Mr Speaker, on his question of first step, it is intended that this is the beginning of a process to complete on what we've already agreed, but also to have annual summits so that we can take our cooperation and coordination further step by step, and we will do that whilst keeping to the red lines that we had in our manifesto. On the question of a customs union, the problem with his proposal, as I know he knows, is that we've just struck the deal with India. We've just struck a deal with the US. If we now undo that good work, we undo all the benefits of those two deals. And for JLR and car manufacturers, this is the here and now of their jobs at the moment. And that is why we had our red lines and we've kept to those red lines. I'm not prepared to rip up the benefits that we've negotiated in these deals.
Chair of the Foreign Affairs Select Committee.
Much, Mr Speaker. Can I begin by thanking the Prime Minister for what he has said about Gaza? It couldn't be clearer, the message that he's sending to the far-right government of Netanyahu, and it should have the unanimous support of this House. It is essentially, this must stop. Turning to the grown-up EU deal, which comes hard on the heels of the two other trade agreements that have been agreed recently, the government is rightly confident that these deals will be popular and that they will provide great benefits to our country. So can I ask the Prime Minister this? Why not take this opportunity to fix a glaring hole in our democracy and simply put those agreements to the vote? To allow them to be scrutinised by this place, I can assure him they will be passed.
Well, Mr Speaker, as she knows, there's a process for implementing any agreement. All of these will require legislation, and therefore they'll go through the House on that basis.
Sir Byrne.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Can I just point out to the Prime Minister that nothing can undo the fact that 17.5 million people voted leave. And they voted to take back control of our laws and to stop paying money to the EU. And that was a considerably larger vote than the 9.7 million who voted Labour at the last election. And now he is submitting to EU regulations without any control, and he is giving money, starting to pay money back to the European Union. He's giving up control over our laws and restoring payments to the European Union. He will pay a bitter political price for this betrayal.
Mr Speaker, he knows full well that we had a red line about not rejoining the EU, no single market, no customs union, no freedom of movement. We were told it was impossible to negotiate a better deal with the EU with those red lines. We've just done it. We've also showed that we are outside the EU because he will appreciate that having a deal with India and the US is inconsistent with membership of the EU. There could be no better evidence that we're not going back into the EU, nor are these negotiations on that basis. I know he understands that very, very well. I'm surprised at the way he puts his question. As for control of the borders, honestly, it went from quadrupling net migration after Brexit to nearly 1 million. That wasn't controlling our borders. It's a complete lack of control on the other side. aside, Mr. Speaker, on the question of payments, I do think it's important to appreciate that we've achieved unprecedented access to EU markets without the budgetary payments of member states. That is an incredible achievement. The only payment under the SPS agreement are administrative costs to support the relevant costs of implementing and administering the scheme. For schemes and payments where it's in our national interest, we will negotiate proportionate contributions, as already happens under the deal negotiated by them, for example, in relation to R&D and into Horizon. He knows all that very well.
Davey, Hillier, Chair of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I congratulate the Prime Minister on this achievement on top of 2 great trade deals. This is also important if we're trying to deliver growth in the economy. And could he outline what he thinks the 2 or 3 main gains are in short order to boost the economy so we can build that public spending that we so badly need?
Well said.
Well, Mr. Speaker, the way we've approached it is the question of bringing our bills down, which is why the SPS agreement is so important, protecting and driving up jobs, which is why both the EU, the India and the US agreements are so important, particularly for car manufacturing, but equally for pharmaceuticals, which are protected under our agreement. But, Mr. Speaker, there's a bigger picture here. These are 3 individual trade deals, but what they've done taken together is to show that other countries want to do deals with the UK now in a way that they didn't before.
Esther McVey.
With youth unemployment higher in Europe, in countries like France, Spain, Portugal and Sweden, I can see why the EU pushed for a youth mobility scheme to help get their youth unemployment figures down. So can the Prime Minister tell the House what impact assessment he has done on his youth scheme for youth unemployment for young Brits, particularly white working class boys who suffer the most? And can he tell the House today the cap he has put on numbers for people coming into the UK? If he can't, this is a bitter betrayal of British youth.
Mr. Speaker, this provides young people in the United Kingdom the opportunity to work, to study and to travel in Europe. It is going to be a capped scheme of limited duration and with visas, something, again, everybody said we couldn't negotiate. We have negotiated. And in relation to our question about what we're doing for young people in this country, she should look to the Trailblazer schemes that we set up that are helping young people back into work.
Noah Law.
Will the Prime Minister join me in inviting members opposite to celebrate the restoration of access to our British shellfishers and the reduction in frictions on the 70% of our British seafood that's exported to the EU, and encourage members opposite to get out there and help us deploy the £360 million of fishing and coastal community funding that we have unlocked?
Well, I thank him for his question. Under their deal, shellfish was locked out. Shellfish can now be sold back into the market, hugely important for places like Cornwall. That's why their response to this is so unserious and so un-Tory, if I may say so.
Sir Olney.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. On 6 separate occasions since the beginning of the year, I've asked the Paymaster General about plans for a youth mobility scheme, and every single time he told me that Labour had no plans. I realise I was in error. I should have asked about a youth experience scheme. But I'd like to ask the Prime Minister now, does he have a timescale for when such a scheme can be put into operation and start to see the benefits that we on the Liberal Democrat benches know that this can bring to young people here in the UK and across the EU?
Well, I thank you for a question. We've moved at pace to get this far. And we now need to move at pace to implement what we agreed yesterday. So we will be doing that. We'll update the House as we do so.
Marsha de Cordova.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I begin by congratulating the Prime Minister and colleagues on their success at the summit? The government's hard work has paid off. This is a good deal and a good first step. Businesses will benefit from a reduction in red tape and consumers will see cheaper bills in the long run. The announcement on Youth Experience and the Erasmus Plus will be welcome to the many young people in my Battersea constituency. I also welcome the recognition of the value of touring artists, both in the EU and in the UK. I realise the barriers to touring are complex, Prime Minister, But will he actually commit to keep up the hard work in this area so we can begin to reduce and break down those barriers?
Well, I thank her for her question. She raises a really important point on touring artists, and we're absolutely committed to getting a better deal for touring artists, and that is part of the ongoing work as we go forward from this summit to the next summit.
Stephen Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think the front benches need to calm the jets a wee bit. This is obviously not a surrender, just as it's obviously no substitute for membership of the European Union. Nor indeed is it, as the Prime Minister has repeatedly said today, providing unprecedented access to the EU market. That is simply absurd. But what the deal does do is provide for cooperation in respect of carbon storage. So will the Prime Minister build upon that good work by committing his government to provide the financial support necessary to take the ACON project forward in the north east of Scotland?
Well, Mr. Speaker, this deal does allow us to move forward on renewables and carbon capture as part of the package around renewables, which is why it's so important across the United Kingdom, but particularly in Scotland because of the potential for job opportunities there. And so, of course, we'll press on there. I would gently ask him to reconsider whether he shouldn't support these deals for the whisky sector in Scotland. Scottish Salmon came out yesterday hugely in favour of this deal. He should stand up and support the work that we're doing.
Julie Mims.
Speaker, my Carlisle constituency is home to the world's oldest biscuit factory. Carr's has been making table water, ginger nuts and custard creams for many, many decades. In fact, in about 15 years' time, it will celebrate its 200 years in business. Could the Prime Minister say more about the importance of this deal to food and drink businesses like Pladis, who own and operate the Carr's biscuit factory?
Thank you for raising this. For food, for biscuits, for all the content covered by our SBS agreement, this is a massive step forward because it gets rid of the red tape and the bureaucracy, which costs each business thousands upon thousands of pounds. So, Mr. Speaker, this is good for biscuits, good for business.
Where's the crumbs? Dame Harriet Bowen.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and may I get a serious answer to a very narrow and specific question. We know how much fishing rights the Prime Minister was prepared to give away for how many years in order to accede to the EU demands, but how much UK taxpayers' money is he willing to hand over to the EU to sign up to their protectionist demands?
Well, I remind her that nothing that was negotiated by the last government on fishing has been given away, quite the contrary. In relation to costs, I gave an answer earlier in full, which is we are not paying into the EU budget in the way that EU members do, and that's why this unprecedented access is so important. In relation to schemes and programmes, yes, we will make a proportionate contribution in the same way as happens under the agreement that was negotiated by the party opposite in relation to Horizon and R&D. So it's on the same basis and the same principles that her party, her government as it then was, negotiated in relation to the current arrangements. It's hard to see why, having negotiated those arrangements, they're now suddenly against them.
Matthew Patrick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The energy industry is central to our mission for growth, but it's also important in our tackle against the generational challenge that is climate change. That is a sentiment felt in my constituency of Wirral West, which is proud to be a regional hub of carbon capture and hydrogen storage. Could the Prime Minister please set out how this deal supports the energy industry so we can pursue the growth, bring down energy bills and tackle climate change?
Well, it does so in two ways. Firstly, it makes permanent the energy chapter in the current deal, and then it goes beyond that, Mr. Speaker, to allow us to cooperate and coordinate more closely on energy. We do have the ability already for connection on energy. We're now able to take better advantage of it.
Gavin Roberts.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister will recognise that successive governments and successive parliaments have caused unnecessary and at times intolerable damage to our union. So we can recognise the reduction of some checks on some issues. But can he explain to this House why if the animals and their products that are able to come to Northern Ireland now free of checks are suitable, why is the European Union still intent on banning the very veterinary medicines that those animals take? If standards are the same in the United Kingdom and the European Union, and this Parliament has already decided that the CE markings will be retained, why are products and manufactured goods not part of this arrangement? And will he confirm to this Parliament that it is his intention as Prime Minister to rid Northern Ireland of the Windsor framework and get rid of the barriers within our union?
Well, can I thank him for his question? As he will know, the SPS agreement that we have negotiated is good for Northern Ireland, because it means that the current SPS agreement for Northern Ireland now is complemented by and comes up against the agreement for the UK as a whole, and that will be a huge step forward for Northern Ireland, which I know he cares about and others care about and I care about, and it is amongst the advantages of the SPS deal that we have struck. On the question of vet meds, I do understand the issue, and we're working to resolve the particular problem that he has set out, and he's right to do so, but we're working to resolve that. I think we're in a better position to resolve it by cooperating and coordinating with the EU, which is what we are doing. On the Windsor framework, it is important that we implement the agreements that we have in place, because the blunt truth is nobody will make further agreements with a country that walks away from the agreements they've already put in place.
Matt Doodle.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The last Tory government left the British people at the back of the European queue. That was true for exporters, for farmers, for businesses, but most obviously for my constituents it was true when they stood and watched other nations skip through the e-gates at airports while they waited for hours. Because of holidaymakers in East Renfrewshire are eager to spend more time at the poolside and less time at passport control, can he confirm when he expects to see the benefits of those arrangements around the use of e-gates?
Well, I thank him for his question. The arrangement we got to yesterday with the EU is an absolute clarity that there's no impediment to e-gates, which means that we can now work with member states to get them in place as quickly as possible. And we've already started our work with them to get the e-gates through. We've now cleared the barrier, we're now getting on with it. For very, very years we've had queues because of their bad deals, so pipe down.
France.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The most pernicious part of this deal is dynamic alignment, by which we become an automatic rule taker from the European Union. Labour have been briefing journalists. We have an opt-out from that. I've read the document in detail. We don't. And besides, the ECJ is the ultimate arbiter in a dispute. It is, so the EU will always win. Why, Prime Minister, when the British people voted peacefully and democratically to leave the European Union, have you surrendered that right and made us a rule taker to the EU once again?
I'd forgotten about some of the nonsense that's spouted. Just on the question of how the rules are made, they will go through a parliamentary process in this House. In this House. We are already aligned. We are in alignment. We are just not getting the benefit of it. This gives us the benefit which will be counted in the business jobs and bills that we can deal with this. And in relation to an independent arbiter, there's independent arbitration where there's disputes in this agreement. Look, they all know this. Every trade deal has an arbitration clause to deal with the settlement of disputes. All trade deals have that, including all the trade deals that they have negotiated. On the question of the ECJ, if there's an issue of European law that needs to be referred by the independent arbitrators to the court, they then give a ruling on the interpretation. It passes back to the arbitrators to make the final decision. That is how trade deals work. But I do understand their new policy. Their new policy is against any trade deals. That's never been the Conservative Party policy before, but it's good that we've got clarity now.
Lizzie Collins.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. This deal is very, very welcome, particularly for my farmers in Morecambe and Lunesdale. But, Mr. Speaker, as a young person, I benefited from a year in New Zealand and a year in Spain. Can the Prime Minister assure me that he'll do everything he can to ensure that other young Brits get the same opportunities that I did? Thank you.
Well, Mr. Speaker, I do want young people in this country to have the opportunity under the scheme to work, to travel and to involve themselves in volunteering and other activities in Europe.
Tim.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thanks to the appalling deal done by the Conservatives with the EU in 2020, we saw farmers lose 34% of their export market into the European Union, which contributed to a 41% drop in incomes for livestock farms in my constituency and across the country. So we are encouraged to hear about the access to the European markets for our farmers, but can he say more about that and the extent to which we will be able to know when those opportunities might avail themselves to farmers in Westmoreland and beyond?
Well, I thank him for raising that, which will be of huge interest to his constituents. If I got his number right, I think he said there was a 41% drop in trade because of the deal that the previous government did for farmers, who they claim to champion. What this does, as he'll appreciate, is to ensure that food and agriculture going into the EU will under the SPS agreement, do it without any of the red tape, any of the bureaucracy. That will make it much easier for his constituents, much easier for farmers generally to trade in the EU market, bringing down their costs, which is hugely important for farmers and his constituents. On the question of timing, we'll do it as quickly as possible. We're moving at pace. I do appreciate that for farmers in his constituency, farmers across the country, this is hugely important to undo the damage that the previous government did.
Absolutely.
Can I also congratulate the Prime Minister for this deal? Manchester has a student population of over 100,000, many of whom I represent. They will be pleased to hear, as I am, that the UK and EU will develop a scheme focused on student exchange, supporting young people to study, volunteer, work, or travel across Europe. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that this deal will provide life-changing experiences for our young people and will strengthen our broken relationship with the EU for generations to come?
Well, I can confirm I want those experiences, those opportunities for our young people. I think the country wants those experiences for young people. I'm not even sure the party opposite are genuinely against better opportunities for our young people to go and work and travel in Europe.
Richard Tice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In Boston and Skegness, my fishermen are furious that the Prime Minister has surrendered the fishing industry, and my constituents are furious that you've surrendered on freedom of movement and on rule-taking under the ECJ. But there is good news, Mr. Prime Minister. Do you accept that you've also surrendered the jobs of many of your backbench MPs at the next general election to reform?
Well, I'll happily explain to his constituents the huge benefits of these deals measured in jobs that will be saved, jobs that can now thrive, bills that will come down. And it is really important for our economy that we have these deals. That is in the interest of his constituents. It's in the interest of the whole country.
Gregor Boynton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When it comes to evaluating the merits of the deal, who would the Prime Minister suggest my Livingston constituents listen to? Should it be the Scottish Chamber of Commerce, the NFU Scotland, or Scottish Salmon, all who have welcomed the deal? Or should they listen to John Swinney, who's lining up with the leader of the decision and the member for Clacton, and a desperate misguided event to try and create a constitutional grievance, a deal for which the Deputy First Minister has called important progress?
Well, I was surprised to see the SNP First Minister line up with Reform and the leader of the opposition against a deal which has been welcomed by Scotland Salmon. Welcomed by Scotland Salmon, huge exporter from Scotland, because they know it's good for their business. But that's a pretty small and miserable club for the SNP to be in.
Sir Julian.
If the Prime Minister is right that our food standards are already in alignment with those of the EU, Why could we not have negotiated the deal on the basis of mutual recognition of those standards, as other countries have done, rather than open ourselves up to having to alter our standards in line with whatever the EU may decide to change in the future?
That's a very good question he should put to Boris Johnson.
Dr. Scott Harper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I absolutely welcome this deal. It puts us on the map as an outward-looking nation again, and above all, I think the benefits it brings young people in Edinburgh South West are absolutely worth noting. We know also that it's going to bring lower bills for people shopping for food and also people buying energy right across the UK. So based on that, can you really understand why SNP is uniting with Reform and the Conservatives to take this isolationist approach when it comes to international trade?
Well, I do think it's really hard to fathom, and I do hope they reconsider their position, because lining up against better trade, better business opportunities for Scotland is not in Scotland's interest. To be lining up with Reform is not a place that I would expect them to be, but that's where they are.
Luke Taylor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to start by saying I admire the Prime Minister's faith that this may well end the tired arguments of the past, although on the display of today I think we need to end the tired party of the past to my right before that's the case. A generation of young people have missed out on the opportunities offered by the Erasmus scheme due to the disastrous Brexit deal negotiated by the Conservatives. We're encouraged by the words in the deal about the Erasmus scheme, but what's the timescale for offering that opportunity to our young people once again?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I should say I don't think the party opposite need any help in retiring from the national stage. They're well on their way. In relation to Erasmus, obviously it's important the way we've negotiated this in relation to the balanced approach we will take. As with other aspects, we do want to move ahead on what we've negotiated as quickly as we can. We've moved at speed to get this far, and the instruction from both sides is to move at speed on the other elements.
Thank you,
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I agree with the Leader of the Opposition when she says what matters is whether the terms of the deal have improved for the country and that detail matters. 16,000 firms in this country stopped exporting to Europe under the deal that her government negotiated, and exports dropped a third because the price of her Brexit was paperwork. Under this deal, this government is getting rid of the very much hated export health certificate, which is worth an extra £200 on every single consignment. So this government's deal will help business. Her government's deal hurts business. But can the Prime Minister confirm that as part of reviewing the charges at the border, he will also look at the Tories' hated border operating model so we can really get business moving?
Well, Mr. Speaker, she puts her finger on it, because under their deal there was huge bureaucracy, huge red tape, huge cost to businesses. The reason businesses have come out to support this in huge numbers is because they know this deal is going to make life better for them, it's going to improve their business opportunities and drive our economy forward.
Alfred Blunt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I asked the Prime Minister on the 7th of May to reassure the House that he would not hand over hard-won controls over UK fishing waters in backroom deals with Brussels. In reply, he said a better deal can be had. Does he agree that EU access to our waters until 2038 is only a better deal for Brussels and nothing short of a betrayal of British coastal communities?
Mr. Speaker, the deal we've struck makes it easier for fishermen to sell into the EU market. 72% of their fish is sold into the EU market. Until we came along with the SPS agreement, which is permanent, they had to put up with the red tape and bureaucracy, the added cost, which the party opposite negotiated with disastrous consequences. This makes it easier for them to sell their fish into the market, which is hugely important to them. And on shellfish, which was banned by the party opposite, the doors open again, they can sell into the market. Hugely important.
Mr. Speaker, may I put on the record my thanks to the Prime Minister and the Paymaster General for this landmark first step in the government's reset with the European Union. As the government removes barriers to trade, what further information can the Prime Minister share with the House about how the deal will bring down the cost of living, including for my Bolton West constituents.
Well, Mr Speaker, I would point him to the endorsements from the very many supermarkets yesterday who made precisely that point, which will allow them now to lower the price of goods and food on their shelves. That's good for them and their businesses, it's good for working people, and it massively helps with the cost of living.
Liz Supple.
These incremental improvements are welcome as we begin to move on from some of the illusions of Brexit. There we had all this and far, far more 10 years ago. The Prime Minister once argued, and we quote, "We should retain the benefits of the single market." Given his recent tendency to dismiss the views of others, what would he say to his younger self?
Mr Speaker, I think last week I was overly rude, and I apologise. I do respect the honourable member. She raised a serious point. We're now outside of the EU. We had red lines in our manifesto on the single market. We've kept those red lines and delivered a very good deal with it.
Clive Efford.
Mr Speaker, can I congratulate my right honourable friend on securing this deal? But is he agreement with me that the attitude displayed by the party opposite betrays a fundamental dislike and mistrust of all things European, which makes them totally inadequate for accepting any sort of deal whatsoever with the EU? And can he confirm that no matter where you do an international trade deal, whether it's through WTO rules or with Europe, there is always an arbitration system, whether it's this deal or any other?
Mr Speaker, I thank him for his question. I don't think they're just against all things European, because they say they're against the India deal as well. This is a deal they tried for 8 long years to negotiate. It's deeply embarrassing for them to say that's what they're trying to negotiate, and now they're behind it. They're against the deal with the US, which they said that they wanted to negotiate, which saves thousands upon thousands of jobs. They really go to JLR and tell those workers you're going to reverse that deal, and look at the expressions on their faces. It is further evidence of the decline of the Tory party away from free trade. I never thought I'd see that, but we're seeing it now under this leader of the opposition. He's absolutely right about arbitration clauses. They're there in every trade deal that's ever been struck.
Sir Rodger again.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. I don't want to be dog in the manger, but the Prime Minister's statement appears to me to be very strong on self-congratulation and very short on detail. Now, I know he doesn't like answering detailed questions, but the response that he gave to my right honourable friend, the member for the New Forest, was quite simply unacceptable. When will this be signed off in a form that this House will be able to debate properly and vote upon?
Well, the detail is set out of the agreement we reached yesterday in a document which was released during the course of yesterday, and if he hasn't had the chance to see that, I'll make sure he does. On the detailed text that follows, obviously that needs to be drafted in legal form so that everybody can see it. Of course, we can debate it and scrutinise it, and of course none of this can go through without legislation, so he will have that opportunity. It's quite right that he presses for it.
Joanna Baxter.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. The new UK-EU agreement is a welcome and pragmatic step towards rebuilding a strong trading relationship with our closest economic partner. This deal will help reduce costs, reduce red tape and make it easier for Scottish businesses to compete and grow across European markets. These are not my words, Mr Speaker. They're the words of the Chief Executive of the Scottish Chambers of Commerce. So does the Prime Minister agree with me that when Labour negotiates, business and customers in my constituency of Paisley and Renfrewshire South benefit?
Well, she's absolutely right, and there's reasons why the Chamber of Commerce in Scotland are coming out in support of this deal. It's because they recognise the huge benefits of it, and it's very important in Scotland we do everything we can for working people and for businesses, and that is what we're delivering.
Ellie Chance.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On behalf of the Green Party, I broadly welcome the progress that was made at the summit yesterday. It's not quite the step change that we need, but it is a step forward towards the closest possible relationships with our closest neighbours that we continue to champion, although I would gently point out that it's hardly unprecedented because, of course, up until we left the EU, we had a much better relationship. Can I ask the Prime Minister, though, given that free movement of people in addition to goods, services and capital is such an important component of growth and also of building good relationships, why is he being so timid on the youth mobility scheme, given the huge benefits that this would offer to our young people and our country as a whole?
Good question.
Mr. Speaker, we had a clear red line in our manifesto on freedom of movement. We did that because we had a referendum, and the heart of that referendum, and one of the key issues, was freedom of movement. Everybody made their case, and the country voted to leave. We respect that, and that's why we put the red line in. What we've now negotiated is a scheme that doesn't cross our red lines, but is good for young people, both here and in Europe.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to turn to the cooperation aspect of this agreement, which I congratulate the Prime Minister for. When I was an international liaison prosecutor, my colleagues and I in the CPS, in Eurojust, in Europol, were relieved when the trade and cooperation agreement was finally agreed. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that this new deal enhances and improves our ability to tackle cross-border crime, serious and organised crime, and to keep the people of the UK safe?
Well, can I thank her for her previous work? And one of the important things I was able to do when I was Chief Prosecutor was play our part in Eurojust. Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, I apologise. Before we left the EU, we could play our full part in Eurojust. That meant we shared evidence, we shared strategy, arrest arrangements, and issues about where a case would be prosecuted. What we want to do is to ensure that we improve law enforcement by making sure that wherever we can cooperate better with Europe. That wasn't possible under the deal that the party opposite negotiated. I want to make sure that we have better cooperation on criminal justice issues.
Callum Miller.
The previous deal that was done by the Conservatives tied up many businesses in red tape, so I warmly welcome the progress on SPS. But advanced manufacturers in my constituency are part of integrated supply chains with the EU, and they are still tied up in red tape. In light of the further summits that will be held, can the Prime Minister outline what this government will do to reduce that red tape and allow them to grow jobs in my constituency?
Well, I thank you. On SPS, obviously, we've taken that step, the red tape goes, but we do want to reduce trade barriers wherever we can, both with the EU and anywhere else, frankly, because at a time when we're moving into a new era on trade and the economy, we certainly are, we need to reduce trade barriers across the country for the reasons that he set out.
Liam Conlon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Prime Minister for his work on this deal, which takes important steps in resetting our relationship with the EU. Alongside lowering trade barriers, many of my younger constituents in Beckham and Penge will be excited by the prospect of a youth experience scheme. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that far from being a concession, a youth experience scheme mirroring agreements that we already have in countries like Australia and New Zealand would create fulfilling cultural opportunities for young people across the country?
Well, I do agree with him and remind the House we do have agreements in place with a number of other countries, some of them actually negotiated by the party opposite. I find it hard to believe anybody in this House genuinely thinks that we want to make it harder for our young people to work and study and travel in Europe.
Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We need 15 billion barrels of oil and gas between now and 2050, and currently we're expected to produce just 4 billion. New licences would support tens of thousands of jobs in this country, tens of billions of tax revenue. Can the Prime Minister assure the House that the agreement on alignment on climate policies does not stand in the way of common sense restoration of new licences in the North Sea so that we can produce the oil and gas we must consume in this country?
Mr. Speaker, on the question of licences, we have been clear about honouring new licences, and there's nothing in this deal that cuts across what we've said previously in relation to licences.
Sheehan Wara.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A trade deal with the world's fastest growing economy, which the party opposite failed to achieve. A trade deal with the world's richest economy, which the party opposite failed to achieve. A trade deal with the world's biggest trading bloc, which the Tories in Reform would tear up despite the enormous benefits for British businesses, consumers and tourists. Would the Prime Minister agree with me that all this, plus financial stability, investment in key public services and our national security and infrastructure. That makes the UK the best place to start and grow a business in the world. And further, would he agree that given our fantastic quality of living, our great universities and skilled and passionate people, the North East should be the destination of choice for such investment?
I think she's right that the 3 trade deals taken together do indicate that other countries want to negotiate and deal with the UK because they can see the path that we are on, and that is good and should be welcomed because there are huge benefits of it. And of course the North East and her constituents should benefit under all 3 of these deals.
Chris Law.
Speaker, the people of Scotland overwhelmingly voted to remain in the European Union in 2016 and overwhelmingly support rejoining it today. Perhaps you may want to listen. A fact that's been continuously ignored by successive UK governments. The limited measures announced do not come anywhere near to repairing the hammer blow that Brexit will continue to inflict on our public finances. Indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker, UK government's own figures show the cost of Brexit is 20 times greater, or 4% of GDP, compared with this deal. So does the Prime Minister recognise that by continuing to pursue this disastrous Brexit policy, he's demonstrating that Westminster governments will never work in the interests of Scotland?
I find it impossible to follow his reasoning. He thinks that we should be in the EU. He thinks we should be in the EU. That was voted on, but he's entitled to his position. But he's against a closer relationship. I don't understand why the SNP is against this deal. This is a closer relationship. There's a complete contradiction in the argument that he is making. And it's completely out of kilter with Scottish businesses who are welcoming what we achieve tomorrow. And on behalf of Scotland, they should be welcoming it.
Conor Naismith.
Madam Deputy Speaker, can I congratulate the Prime Minister for securing this sensible, pragmatic deal that demonstrates that we can respect the result of the 2016 referendum without settling for a bodged Boris Brexit. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that if the Conservatives and Reform want to rip up this deal, they should explain to my constituents why they should pay higher prices for food and energy?
Well, I completely agree with him. They should go around the country and explain to constituents why they should pay higher prices. I think they'll get a pretty universal response.
Harriet Cross.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Our fishermen had been promised, and the EU had agreed, that annual access agreements would be reverted to from 2026. But seemingly, at the 11th hour, the Prime Minister abandoned our fishing communities, our fishing fleets and control of our seas by handing not 3, not 4 or 5, but 12-year of multi-annual agreements of access to the EU. He sold out our fishermen to meet his self-imposed deadline for announcing the agreement. He has shown that he won't stand strong for UK fishermen, so can he confirm that it will be Parliament who have the final say on the fisheries deal and it won't be ratified elsewhere by unelected officials in Whitehall or Brussels?
Well, Mr. Speaker, the simple fact of the matter is, under the agreement that they struck, it was much more difficult for fishermen to sell into the European market. We are making it much easier. That's 72% of their stock. Shellfish can be sold back into the market again, and we've set up a fund for our fishing communities. The alternative, which was to come off the current agreement, then negotiate every year with no certainty at all, is not good for anyone.
Joe White.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I want to welcome and congratulate the Prime Minister for this deal, which will benefit so many of my constituents. And this is exactly what businesses in my constituency asked for when they sent me to Parliament. The youth mobility scheme will also benefit local farmers, but what I want to know is how young people in my area will benefit from it, opening up to experiences and opportunities that they would have never otherwise dreamed of. This is a scheme that must not just benefit middle-class kids on their gap year.
Well, I completely agree with her wholeheartedly. This has to benefit all of our young people, and we'll make sure that it does, whether that's work or travel or study, because it is a really important opportunity for young people that we would want to provide to them and to help them then to take advantage of.
Dr. Andrew Murison.
How will Britain's head start in gene editing technology be impacted by the rule-taking reversionary measures that the Prime Minister has announced?
Mr Speaker, that is an issue that we are discussing and engaging on because it's an important issue, as he well knows.
Peter Swallow.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Morrison's has said this deal will ease pressure on food prices. Asda has said it has the potential to significantly reduce costs and bureaucracy. And the British Retail Consortium has said it will help keep costs down. So does the Prime Minister agree with their assessment that this deal will help families in Bracknell Forest and across the country facing a high cost of living?
I think this will massively help his constituents because it will bring down costs. Morrison's isn't the only supermarket that's come out in support of this agreement. Pretty well all the supermarkets have come out openly supporting this agreement, and there's a reason for that, because it will bring the prices on their shelves down. That is good for working people across the country.
Caroline Bowden.
Deputy Speaker, I welcome the SPS part of the agreement that was signed yesterday, as I'm sure all the farmers of South Devon will, and those who are exporting fish and shellfish from Brixham. Now, the Prime Minister may not know the answer to this question, but perhaps one of his ministers will. Could I ask whether bivalve molluscs that are fished in Grade B water will be included in this SPS agreement, which is very important for one of my major exporters? Thank you.
Look, I mean, she raises a really important issue. I'm not going to pretend I've got the answer in my back pocket, but what I will do is make sure that she gets the proper answer to her question that is detailed, that she can then make use of with her constituents.
Rupa Huck.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It's brilliant that the Brexit logjam that cast such a long shadow over so many years over this House has been smashed by this Prime Minister.
Yeah.
Could he indicate when we might hear a bit more about the youth experience scheme that's been so yearned for and so welcomed by the universities, by the English language teaching sector, and also by my staff team and son, who were born too late to have a say in any of the mess that the Tories left behind?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, we will develop the plan in relation to the Youth Experience Scheme with our partners, and we have instructed our teams to move on all fronts as quickly as we can.
David Reid.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Prime Minister states through a new security and defence partnership the way will be paved for British defence firms to access the new European Defence Fund, a fund that I think we can collectively agree will allow our continent to defend ourselves against Putin's autocratic regime. Madam Deputy Speaker, how long does the Prime Minister think access to this fund will take? Weeks, months or years?
Certainly not years, because the whole point of the fund is to be part of the collective response to the challenge in Ukraine. And the fund came about because of the work we're doing with the Coalition of the Willing as one of the initiatives out of that. And therefore everybody involved wants to move at speed, and that's the basis on which we have approached this. What yesterday does is knock out one of the gateway issues that we were otherwise facing, so that we can work with others to access that fund. But it will be as quick as we can, because the situation in Ukraine is extremely serious, and we need to address it as quickly as possible.
Kirstine Sullivan.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank the Prime Minister for negotiating this deal, which is good for the UK, and according to umpteen businesses, it's good for Scotland. As someone who benefited from a year in France many years ago, I welcome the work underway to give young people in my constituency access to a youth experience scheme, but can also ask the Prime Minister to work at pace to ensure that our sports people and musicians can showcase their talents and are no longer subjected to the Tories' botched Brexit.
Well, thank you for raising it. It's a really important issue. We will work as quickly as we can on that issue, because I think whichever way people voted, they didn't really vote to stop creatives and sports people crossing national boundaries to show their talent in whichever way that may be. So we do need to resolve it.
Manuela Pertigella.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The impact of the Creative Europe programme between 2014 and 2019 on the UK arts, film, publishing and other creative sectors was hugely beneficial, not just for practitioners and organisations, but also for the country as a whole. Will the government look into the possibility of participating again to this creative programme to further boost the economic potential of our creative industries?
Madam Deputy Speaker, we're obviously set out yesterday the areas where we'd reached agreement. We will now have annual summits, but we'll approach this on a value for money basis.
Luke Charters.
Deputy Speaker, can I congratulate the PM and the Paymaster General on this deal, which makes York Outer better off, and in particular the agreement on e-gates, a deal which the party opposite could never achieve. So will the government prioritise e-gates talks with member states in popular holiday destinations like Spain, Portugal and France to ease summer travel chaos for sun-seeking Brits?
Yes, we will, and we already are, because it's important that we now get on with this as quickly as we can.
Bernard Subjecti.
Speaker. Ursula von der Leyen yesterday said a second step of further negotiations would be required before British firms would be eligible to compete for joint procurements aligned to the Security Action for Europe Fund. The Prime Minister spoke warmly about the positive industry response, but the CEO of the ADS Group has said it was somewhat underwhelming in the lack of detail. So what is the detail on the areas that need further negotiation before British firms even have the possibility of bidding for access to the Safe Fund, let alone the creation of thousands of jobs?
Let me answer him directly, because the first thing was to get through the first gateway. The second gateway, because this is a fund that's being set up at the moment, is to then negotiate our way into the scheme. That was always the two-stage process. The scheme itself has not been in existence for very long and is being developed, and so along with our European partners, we will move that on at pace.
Rachel Maskell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Well, residents and businesses in York will really welcome this deal. Our university sector is our second largest export. So could the Prime Minister say more about how this deal will benefit higher education, not least in our research base, but also in being able to attract the very best into our country?
Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, we do want to attract the very best into our country and continue our efforts to do so. The measures we set out yesterday will now help in that effort. They're not the total sum of our effort, but they will help in that effort.
Sammy Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. After every EU summit, the people of Northern Ireland have been subjected to spin, broken promises, and in some cases downright lies. The Prime Minister today said that the new SPS agreement will mean no more lorry drivers queuing for 16 hours at the border with rotting food in the back, no more needless checks that made the borders trade so hard, even within our own market between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. If what he is saying is true, can he tell me today that the £140 million border post being built in my constituent, spread over 10 acres, designed to carry out the very checks he says are now disappearing, is no longer necessary, and will construction on it stop?
He raises a really important point, and what we do want to do with this agreement is to ensure that we do remove unnecessary checks wherever they are, but particularly we've had in focus the situation with Great Britain and Northern Ireland. And I do want to make sure that we ensure that we have real improvement on the situation on the ground and don't go to unnecessary expense. I do genuinely think for Northern Ireland this was a big step in the right direction. Yesterday we'll continue to make sure that we make progress.
Alan Gemmell.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Unlike the SNP's singular failure wholeheartedly to support our defence sector, this deal is good for Scottish defence firms. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that Scottish firms gaining access to the €150 billion defence fund is a huge opportunity for jobs and manufacturers in Scotland and in my constituency of Central Ayrshire?
Yes, absolutely. And getting that gateway opened is hugely important for Scottish businesses in defence and security, and those businesses on defence and security in Scotland are world leading. They're some of the best that there are, and so it would be a welcome opportunity for them.
Luke Evans.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Labour government can't answer how much the Chagos deal costs. The Labour government can't answer how much the cost of NHS England is. Can the Prime Minister answer how much this reset deal will cost, and that there will be no further expenditure to the EU?
Madam Deputy Speaker, I've set out how the costs will be approached. What we're not going to do is to make those budgetary payments that EU members do. We will look at proportionate payments into schemes, as is currently the case in relation to Horizon, negotiated by the previous government. But the cost of the Tories on the country has been absolutely incalculable.
Tulip Sadiq.
Madam Deputy Speaker, may I congratulate the Prime Minister on securing a landmark deal with our European neighbours. The Prime Minister will know that my constituency has been a leading light in creative industries for a long time, not just because my predecessor was a double Oscar-winning actress, but local actors have been coming to me expressing their frustration about securing work in Europe because of delays to work visas and also because of the limit of 90 days for UK nationals. So could I ask the Prime Minister, could he reassure my local performers that they won't just be waiting in the wings while the rest of Europe takes centre stage?
Well, I thank her for raising this, which will be really important to her constituents and to many others. We are incredible in the creatives sector, and as I say, I honestly don't think that whether people voted Leave or Remain, anybody really wanted or intended that our artists, our creatives, should have difficulties getting on with their trade, and we will work at pace to try and resolve that.
Vicky Slade.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. British people having access to e-gates is welcome, as the Minister for EU Relations said to the BBC. It should ensure more time for UK residents when abroad. But my constituents in Mid-Dorset North Ball have a better suggestion to achieve that. Does the Prime Minister agree that we should be developing a reciprocal travel arrangement so Brits can return to 6-month visits to the continent as EU visitors can here, doing away with the confusing 90 and 180-day rule?
Yeah. Well, I think the e-gates will make a huge difference and probably be the first impact that many people see, hopefully getting those in train just as quickly as we can. As for other measures, we are looking at other measures.
Mark Ferguson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Prime Minister's statement and this deal. Perhaps most important to people in Gateshead will be the downward pressure on food prices. So I ask the Prime Minister, when it comes to food prices, when it comes to this deal, would he rather listen to Asda, Morrison's or perhaps M&S, or the Leader of the Opposition who doesn't think sandwiches are food?
I listen to business on this, and they are universal in what they say about food, and that's why I am surprised that the party opposite is against a deal that brings down the price of food.
Greg Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Dynamic alignment does undermine sovereignty, and to undermine sovereignty does not just undermine the central principle that 17.4 million people voted for, but it undermines everybody who respects the democratic outcome of that referendum. So if the Prime Minister won't think again about this Brexit betrayal, will he at the very least reinstate the European Scrutiny Committee of this House so that this House can scrutinise every single rule that we now have to take rather than make?
Absolutely. Well, Madam Deputy Speaker, I've set out the position in relation to how the rules will be applied. We are already aligned. We don't get the benefit. This allows us to get the benefit, which is why businesses are so in favour of it. Every trade deal requires agreement on both sides as to the way forward. This agreement is no different.
Darren Paffy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I congratulate the Prime Minister on this common sense reset? Does he agree that while the Conservatives slammed the door of opportunity in the faces of younger generations with their useless Brexit deal, this youth mobility scheme opens up life-changing experiences for young people from Southampton? And can he say how schools and universities can have input into shaping the best scheme possible?
Well, this does provide great opportunity, and we will make sure that all those interested are able to help us in the design of the scheme.
Wendy Chamberlain.
Madam Deputy Speaker, to re-emphasise the point made by my noble friend, the member for Mid Scotland and Poole, Mid Dorset, my constituent runs an agricultural consultancy which requires travel to the EU, which is especially frequent during seasonal peaks, and he has been hampered by the rolling 90-day rule. And I think the issue here is that EU citizens coming to the UK have 180 days and 365. So what we are asking for is an equalisation of that scheme. Is the Prime Minister going to look at that?
We are looking at a range of issues. I completely understand the point that she makes and the frustration that causes for her constituents and for people across the country.
Sarah Coombs.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I spent this morning with British metal manufacturing businesses, which are so important in my constituency of West Bromwich and across the West Midlands. Like so many other sectors, this industry welcomes this deal, particularly the emissions trading scheme linkage and the steel safeguarding, which will boost jobs, boost trade and cut red tape. Can the Prime Minister agree with me that this deal firmly backs UK manufacturing and metal industries, and will he continue to bang the drum for them here and around the world?
Well, I can firmly agree with her, and it's not just this deal, because it goes with the India deal and it goes with the US deal, where we've made real progress when it comes to our exports.
Peter Bedford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Given that my constituents in Mid-Leicestershire overwhelmingly voted to take back control of their borders at the 2016 referendum, what safeguards specifically is he putting in place to ensure that his youth experience scheme isn't open borders by the back door? Otherwise, it'll be seen by my constituents as yet another Brexit betrayal.
Well, the scheme will be time limited, it will be visa-led, and it will be capped. And that is a good scheme for young people in this country to go into Europe, but it will have those features which we negotiated because we had a red line about freedom of movement.
Josh Fenton-Glynn.
Deputy Speaker, Calder Valley is home to many of this kind of SMEs that simply stopped trading with Europe because of the disastrous deal from the benches opposite. Can the Prime Minister assure me that he won't just stop here, but will continue to work to open more of our borders to more of our businesses?
He raised a really important point, and the Federation of Small Businesses have come out strongly in favour of this deal for that very reason, because they know the impact it will have on small and medium-sized businesses.
Danny Chambers.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I thank the Prime Minister for this statement today. It's certainly a step in the right direction, and closer ties of Europe's got to be good for businesses and farming. I would like to ask the Prime Minister specifically about medicine supplies and shortages. Madam Deputy Speaker, I've heard from a worryingly large number of people in Winchester with chronic health conditions who required vital daily medication to manage their condition, for example, anti-seizure medications or ADHD medication. Will the Prime Minister commit to removing medicine supply barriers with Europe and also commit to delivering an EU medicines agency agreement to ensure we can free up these supplies?
He'll have seen how far we got yesterday, but obviously we want to move forward from there. We'll look at a range of other issues. I can't make any promise or commitment here. It'd be wrong to do so. But where there are frustrations, we want to unblock frustrations. Common sense drives this.
Gordon McKee.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. A deal with India, the United States, and now this government is repairing our relationship with Europe. That is something that I and thousands of my constituents will welcome. So can I congratulate the Prime Minister and ask him to go as fast as we can in securing the finalisation of the scheme to allow our young people to live, work and study in Europe?
Well, I endorse his comments, and we will go at pace to move on the commitments we made yesterday.
Dr Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, some of the free trade deals that we already have require us to have autonomy over our regulation. The Prime Minister has said today we will not be a rule taker because we can discuss the rules in this place. But discussion is not the same as control. Can he confirm he has not ceded control to disapply or diverge from regulations in Europe?
She will see from the agreement text that this is subject to our constitutional arrangements, and in the application of the rules, it is the application in this House that matters.
Claire Hughes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I also put on the record my thanks to everyone who's worked so hard to get this hat-trick of deals across the line. The EU is Wales's biggest trading partner. Over 90% of Welsh lambs exported goes to the EU. So would the Prime Minister agree with me that this landmark agreement is brilliant news for food and drink producers in Wales, not least mussel producers and farmers in my constituency of Bangor Aberconwy?
Well, it will make a huge difference to her constituents, and she's absolutely right to champion their interests, and this deal will hugely help them in their businesses, in their trade, in their local economy.
Robin Swan.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In an earlier answer, the Prime Minister said that he would continue with the implementation of the Windsor Framework. That will actually see more bureaucracy and red tape introduced between Great Britain and Northern Ireland before an SPS deal can be delivered. Will the Prime Minister not agree that if his partnership with the EU is so positive, it would be better to pause the implementation of any more bureaucracy and red tape and therefore add any more costs to Northern Ireland businesses before his deal can be achieved?
I don't think we should pause the implementation of deals that we've already got. I do agree with the underlying sentiment that we should be doing everything we can through this deal and further steps to ensure that trade between Great Britain and Northern Ireland is the same for across the rest of the United Kingdom.
Jessica Toll.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. As the proud owner of 2 English bulldogs, can I welcome the reintroduction of pet passports? Not only will this make it easier for us to travel to Europe with Clive and Bertie, but it will also bring down the cost massively. And this isn't the only part of the deal that will bring bills down for British consumers. So can the Prime Minister tell us how my constituents in Bournemouth West will benefit from this deal?
There we are, an hour and a half, and we didn't get to pet passports yet. But I'm really glad we did, because obviously this is an advance for pet passports, along with the very many other advances that will progress as soon as possible. I assume the party opposite against pet passport progress as well.
Sarah Pochin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Will the Prime Minister admit to the British people that this deal takes this country back under the jurisdiction of the European Court of Justice, which is now able once again to overrule our courts, surrendering our judicial sovereignty?
No, I mean, that's just wrong under the agreement. There's an independent arbitration. It's the same... It's the same as the Windsor framework, which you negotiated. It is an important point. It's an independent arbitration process. There's the same process for pretty well every trade deal that's struck, not just by us and other countries, but most other countries. In this particular case, if the independent arbitration needs reference on a point of law, it's referred to the ECJ, which then refers it back to the independent arbitrator to make a decision. So that's how it operates.
Josh Dean.
Speaker. Can I thank the Prime Minister for his statement today and warmly welcome this landmark deal with the European Union? And can I welcome in particular the commitment to work towards a youth experience scheme to once again allow our young people to live, work and travel freely in Europe? Does the Prime Minister agree with me that while this Labour government is taking important steps to open up opportunities that will shape our young people's future, the party opposite is dangerously stuck in the past?
Well, I would agree with that. I think they're lost in the past. I think they're lost altogether now. They're on a decline into oblivion. As I say, a once great party that used to support trade deals is now against every single trade deal. It's a pretty extraordinary turnaround.
Mike Wood.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Paragraph 27 of the Common Understanding published yesterday requires the immediate application of European Union rules relating to food, sanitary and phytosanitary safety. Can the Prime Minister set out what measures would be open to the EU should this Parliament choose not to adopt those new European Union laws?
First thing I would say is this. We're not making an argument for lowering our standards. And therefore, we're proud to have high standards at the moment. We want to maintain those high standards. But there will, of course, be provision, should the occasion arise, for dealing with any conflicts that may arise.
Rosie Writing.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Business and Trade Committee visited Brussels earlier this year, and we saw first-hand how the previous Conservative government damaged our relationships with our close trading partners, and British businesses paid the price. Can the Prime Minister confirm that it is this Labour government that is putting our national interests first and getting the deals that show Labour is the party of business?
Well, I can. We've approached this on a serious, pragmatic basis. We've got to deal with 10 strands that massively takes our country forward. That's on top of the India deal and the US deal. They spent many years failing to get these deals. That's the truth of it.
Clive Jones.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The UK-EU summit was noticeably scarce on medicine access cooperation, an area where we are failing massively behind behind compared to our European allies. Can the Prime Minister ask the Minister for Secondary Care to meet with me so we can discuss why only 25% of new cancer medicines approved by the EU are fully available in the UK?
Well, it raises a really important point, and we will continue our discussions with others to try to resolve some of the frustrations that common sense would suggest we can find a better solution to, and we will.
Lewis Atkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Sunderland is proud to be a city of makers, from cars to music. Without reversing Brexit, those makers need access to Europe. Whether it be exporters like Nissan need the certainty to export, or musicians need the freedom to tour. So can the Prime Minister outline how this deal will support good jobs in Sunderland, whether they be in the motor or the music industries?
Well, let me rest on his first example, which is cars, because both the India deal, which massively slashed the tariff on cars, is good for car manufacturing and good for car export. The deal with the US it saves thousands upon thousands of jobs in the car industry, and that's why it should be welcomed.
Joshua Reynolds.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Many will be concerned that the Prime Minister's EU deal does not cover UK's participation in future EU research programmes. So could the Prime Minister tell the House how he's going to ensure that we will be able to participate in future EU research programmes once Horizon finishes?
Well, we are committed, as he knows, to Horizon, and we'll retain that commitment in relation to research because it's so important for our own national interest.
Emily Darlington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. It never ceases to surprise me how little the opposition understand about making trade deals, and maybe that's why they never made a good trade deal.
Well done.
But the people that we don't need to explain that to is the 19,000 small and medium-sized enterprises in my constituency in Milton Keynes. These businesses have been choked by the red tape agreed by the party opposite. And they agree with the Federation of Small Business that this finally reduces and gets rid of the bottleneck. Can he tell the businesses in my constituency and across the country when we can finally be relieved of the Tories' red tape that is crushing our small businesses?
Well, she's absolutely right about the red tape having such an impact on our small businesses, which is why I'm really pleased we've made progress. We now need to make further progress as quickly as we can to ensure businesses to thrive in the markets that they want to trade in.
Jim Allister.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I note the carefully chosen wording of the Prime Minister's statement. Britain is back on the world stage, delivering for Britain, not the United Kingdom. I note that his SPS deal is with Great Britain. That, of course, is because Northern Ireland has already been captured by the EU, subject to its laws and its customs code. And that is why the Irish Sea border remains. Could I ask the Prime Minister, in regard to the SPS deal as it applies to Northern Ireland, is it correct that customs declarations and customs checks will still continue on goods from GB to Northern Ireland, even though they might be SPS goods? Those will still operate.
Yesterday was a step forward in that regard. It does allow us to reduce frustrations and barriers which nobody wants to see. And I can assure him, I genuinely want us to get into the best position we can in relation to Northern Ireland. It mattered to me in the negotiations, and one of the principles we took into them will continue with that work because I do know how much it matters.
Torquil Crichton.
Deputy Speaker. I suspect if there was a barrel of salt herring in it for every member of the opposition, this fishing deal would not be salty enough for them. But in fact, it's a sweet deal for prawn fishermen and shellfish fishermen in Hillier, for salmon producers, for crofters, though not for their lambs. And isn't the real betrayal of fishing communities the fact, the challenge for reform, that 80% of England's fishing quota is in the hands of foreign companies or the super-rich? The challenge for the SNP, that 45% of Scotland's quota is in the hands of a few companies, and the challenge for us to unwind that privatisation of the ocean and make sure that fishing communities across the UK benefit.
I'm grateful for this question. I think that's why it's so important that we're putting the money that we are, over £300 million, into working with those communities to take advantage of the deal that we struck yesterday.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We heard from ministers over the weekend that nothing is agreed until everything is agreed. The Prime Minister said in his statement that the deal paves the way for access to the €150 billion defence industrial programme, SAFE. If everything has been agreed, then why does the Security and Defence Partnership not include access to the SAFE industrial programme now?
Because the programme itself is being developed at speed. It was only announced the other week. It was announced in response to and as part of the work we're doing with the Coalition of the Willing. And therefore, knocking out the first gateway was important. We will now work with the EU to ensure we can access that fund as quickly as possible. It's not a long existing fund that's been in place for years. It is developing at the moment in response to the situation in Ukraine. I think he does know that.
Alistair Strathern.
Speaker, I think the response to today's deal has been really quite striking. At a time when we need to be driving down on the cost of food for our constituents, retailers are lining up to say it will have that impact, and yet the Tories in Reform would like to put those costs back onto my constituents. At a time when we should be supporting our farmers and food producers, we're removing barriers and red tape, and yet opposition parties would like to bring those barriers back. My constituents voted for change because they were fed up of narrow ideological interests holding our country back. Doesn't this deal show why they were quite so right to do so?
Madam Deputy Speaker, the principles are bills down and jobs up, and that's exactly what this deal delivers.
Gregory Campbell.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the Prime Minister has spent the past hour and a half indicating the benefits he sees from the deal. Does he agree with me, and does he recognise that one of the potentially toxic side effects of the deal is that there will be those on the left of UK politics who will see this as the first step towards rowing back on the vote of the people 9 years ago, while on the right of the UK politics they will see a determination to stop them, and therefore rather than bring people together, it potentially could cause a toxic division?
Well, the approach we've taken is a pragmatic approach, a common sense approach, with our absolute focus on whether we can reduce bills, which is hugely important to people, particularly in a cost of living crisis, and drive up jobs in our economy. They're the principles that have driven to us. I recognise that on the extremes, on whichever side people want to say they're on, we'll never be satisfied. But I do think the country is fed up with continuing 9 years' worth of discussion and debate and toxic divide. It's time to move on from that, to look forward, not backwards, and this deal will help us do that.
Melanie Ward.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The truth is that this deal with the EU is good for my constituents in Fife, good for Scotland and good for the UK. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that the SNP are tying themselves in knots over this deal, while the member for Aberdeen South and the Scottish First Minister are desperate to talk it down? The Deputy First Minister was in Downing Street last night saying how wonderful it is, and she is right.
I learned this morning the Deputy First Minister was in I think the garden at Downing Street last night. As she was with businesses. That was a business reception, Madam Deputy Speaker. It was buzzing because they were celebrating the deal. It was very good to see her there. I'd like to see other members of the SNP joining her because she's got the right judgment on this one.
Andrew George.
Madam Deputy Speaker, fishermen in my constituency were let down by the Conservatives and their Brexit friends, and now feel very disappointed at the news about the EU vessel access within the 6 to 12 mile limit. Both before and after Brexit, we have retained regulatory autonomy within the 6 to 12 mile zone, and therefore will the Prime Minister ensure that we exercise our right to control the access of vessels within that area, especially in respect of grandfather rights, kilowatt effort, fishing methods and other regulatory controls to ensure that area is properly regulated?
Minister.
It's the same arrangements as are currently in place, and of course they are reciprocal, which is really important. But what will be a huge benefit to his constituents is the reduction in red tape and bureaucracy in selling their stock into the EU market, because now, and it's a huge percentage, over 70%, that comes without the red tape which drives up their costs.
Donald.
Deputy Speaker. Interventions such as those for the member from Rayleigh and Billericay have really demonstrated that the Conservative Party have parted company with those of us who've run small exporting businesses in the past. Perhaps instead of collaborating on the reform benches, he could talk to small businesses in my constituency in the defence supply chain, or those who support Nissan in their automotive supply chain, who stand to benefit from this trade deal. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that instead of carping on and talking down our country as Reform and the Conservatives do, it's this Labour government's plan for change that's delivering for British jobs and British businesses?
Yes, there's only one party of business now, and it's right here in government.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. My constituency of Strangford supports the fishing sector in Portavogie, and through the Fish Producers Organisation speaks on behalf of those in Ardglass and Kilkeel, as well as a member for Southdown doesn't bother attending here. So we have to speak for all of those three villages, these fishing villages. Too often negotiations between the UK and the EU, our fishing industry has been the sacrificial lamb. Does the Prime Minister agree with me in the same way that the annexation of Northern Ireland should not have been the price the previous government paid for exiting the EU, that the interests of both Northern Ireland and the wider UK fishing industry should not be expendable? And will the Prime Minister commit to bringing forward additional financial and practical support to support our local fleets in all those three ports and processors as they grapple with reduced access in the years ahead? Thank you.
Well, can I assure him that the £360 million fund will be brought forward as quickly as possible, and in due course we can discuss with him how that will affect his constituents and those that he's representing effectively in here today.
Joe Morris.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I begin by congratulating the Prime Minister on a realistic, sober, sensible deal that will deliver for businesses in my constituency, including with the SPS deal with businesses like Northumberland Honey, which face real barriers to export. But can I particularly welcome the first step on the way to a youth mobility experience? The economy of the North East, the world-class universities have much to gain. And does he agree with me that it's through fostering cooperation, interdependence and trade that we defeat the radical right, not just in this, not just in this chamber, but at the ballot box as well?
Prime Minister.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I think we need to take common sense steps in our own national interest on the economy, on trade, on business, and give young people the opportunities that they deserve.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Our opponents talk of surrender and believe they have a monopoly on concepts like patriotism. To trade, you need to cooperate. So does the Prime Minister agree that to cooperate with our nearest neighbours and with the United States and India is not weak, it's not surrender, it's strong, it's pro-business, it's pro-worker, it's in the national interest, it's in the interests of my constituents in Rugby, businesses, farmers, holidaymakers and young people?
What's astonishing is they don't want to cooperate with the EU, India or the US. In fact, the Leader of the Opposition's approach to diplomacy is to accuse the Indian government of fake news. That isn't a good basis for a relationship to negotiate a better outcome.
Andrew Lewin.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. We've learnt a lot about trade policy in this House today. The party opposite still desperately defending their failed deal. Reform, a no-show from the leader from the party of no deal. And on this side of the House, the only party that is serious about a good deal with the European Union. Can I congratulate the Prime Minister, but also say to him, as somebody who has campaigned for a youth mobility deal, to thank him for this agreement in principle, but to ask him to go as fast as possible to make sure our young people have the opportunity to go and travel and work in the European Union.
Well, I thank him, and we will move at pace on all fronts, and it's very important that young people have those opportunities.
Chris Vince.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank you for getting everybody in, because it was quite a mammoth session today. And can I thank the Prime Minister's statement. I notice many businesses are in support of this deal. My constituency of Harlow is home to many great businesses, from manufacturing companies, pharmaceutical companies, defence manufacturers and food exporters. Can I ask the Prime Minister to outline how this deal will benefit my great businesses in Harlow?
Because it massively reduces bureaucracy and red tape, making it easier for them to do business, opens up opportunities of defence and security, and that's why it's been so welcomed by the business community.
On a point of order.
Point of order, Mark Francois.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker.
I regret that in an earlier exchange, the Prime Minister, who is still in his place, may inadvertently have misled the House. The point of contention is the arbitration mechanism on an SPS deal, on dynamic alignment. This is what the text literally says. The SPS agreement should be subject to a dispute resolution mechanism with an independent arbitration panel that ensures the Court of Justice of the European Union is the ultimate authority for all questions of European Union law, which of course this is. So when the Prime Minister said the court goes back to the arbitration panel, they do that to convey their binding decision. So he's guilty of sophistry at best and potentially something worse.
Can I thank the honourable gentleman for his point of order, which he will know was not a point of order and not a matter for the chair, but he has put it on the record. The Prime Minister.
I won't descend into silly language like he did, but this is an important point. He and I get on, and I don't think his dissent... Well, it was his language, not mine. But this is an important point. There's an independent arbitration, as there is for all this, where an issue, and that can settle most issues, as it does, where an issue of European law arises, which won't be the case in all cases, that there's a point...
Order. I think right honourable members have had the opportunity to get their points on the record. We've had in excess of an hour and a half of the statement from the Prime Minister. I think we should move on to the next business and allow the front benches to swap over.